The Cathar Empire stood as a testament to the power of logic and order. For 17 millennia, they had expanded across the stars, their technological prowess and disciplined military conquering or assimilating all who stood in their path. Their society was built on a foundation of rational thought, methodical planning, and hierarchical precision. They encountered many species in their long history, some primitive, some advanced, some peaceful, some warlike, but none had truly challenged their dominance. Humans were merely the latest curiosity. The Cathar first detected their radio signals some 2 centuries ago, monitored their fumbling steps into space, and eventually established limited diplomatic contact when humans finally developed rudimentary, faster-than-light travel. The consensus among Cathar scholars was clear. Humans were an immature species, technologically backward, emotionally volatile, and ultimately insignificant in the grand calculus of galactic politics. The border skirmish of 57 years ago had only reinforced this view. When human colony ships strayed into a star system the Cathar had already claimed, the resulting conflict was brief and decisive. Official Cathar records described a necessary correction, a minor disciplinary action against an upstart species. The scattered human ships were dispatched with minimal Cathar casualties, their primitive weapons barely denting the magnificent crystalline hulls of the Imperial fleet. At least, that was the story told in academies and broadcast on information networks across Cathar space. Battle Commander Forlag watched the spires of the capital city through the curved window of his dwelling unit. The golden light of the setting sun reflected off the geometric perfection of the towers, creating a kaleidoscope of color that would have entranced most Cathar. Forlag barely noticed. His 4 eyes, the upper pair a deep crimson, the lower amber, remained unfocused, seeing something far beyond the cityscape. A tremor ran through his exoskeletal frame, causing the ceremonial metals affixed to his formal carapace to rattle softly. These involuntary shudders had become more frequent in recent years. His medical attendants attributed them to age, to the natural deterioration of neural pathways after 2 centuries of life. Forlag knie beta. The communication panel near his resting platform chimed softly. Forlag sighed, a whispered hiss through his ventral spiracles, and moved to answer it. Battle Commander. The voice was formal, respectful. The Grand Tactical Archive project awaits your arrival. The Historical Directorate has sent a personal transport for your convenience. I have not forgotten my commitment, Forlag replied, his voice carrying the authoritative resonance that had commanded thousands of warriors in battle. Tell them I shall arrive precisely as scheduled. The panel went dark. Forlag's manipulator appendages traced the outline of one particular medal, the Star of Xylos, awarded for his decisive strategic victory against human aggression. The irony was not lost on him. For 57 years, he had carried the memories alone. For 57 years, he had allowed the Empire to believe its own carefully constructed narrative. Now, they wanted to extract those memories directly from his mind, to preserve them in the Grand Archive for future generations of tacticians to study. What would they find, he wondered, when they peeled back the layers of official history and saw the truth that lurked beneath? The Grand Archive rose from the center of the Science District, a colossal pyramid of black stone and luminescent crystal. Inside, the most advanced minds of the Cathar civilization worked to preserve knowledge in all its forms. The tactical wing, recently constructed, was dedicated to military history, not merely the recording of battles and strategies, but the preservation of the actual experiences of those who had commanded forces in significant conflicts. Battle Commander Forlag, it is an honor to meet you. The young historian who greeted Forlag in the reception chamber bowed deeply, the formal gesture of respect. I am historical analyst Kalen. I have been assigned as your primary interface for the archiving process. Forlag studied the young Cathar. His carapace still had the bluish sheen of youth, unmarked by the darkening that came with age and experience. His posture was perfect, his gestures precise, the product of the finest academies, no doubt. You seem young to be entrusted with this duty, Forlag noted, not unkindly. I specialize in the human-Kithar conflict during my historical studies, Kalen replied, his tone betraying a hint of enthusiasm despite the formal setting. Your tactics at Xylos Nebula are still taught as a definitive example of superior strategic thinking overwhelming technological disadvantage. Forlag felt the familiar tremor beginning in his lower limbs. He suppressed it with effort. Then you will learn much today, young one, he said quietly. The archiving chamber was a marvel of Kthar neurological science. At its center stood a reclined platform, surrounded by a semicircle of monitoring stations. The ceiling above was dominated by a complex array of sensor apparatus, glowing with a soft blue light. Technicians moved with quiet efficiency, preparing the equipment. The process is entirely non-invasive, explained the lead technician, Dr. Severax, as attendants helped Forlag onto the platform. The neurohistorical interface creates a harmonic resonance with your memory centers, allowing us to record experiences as they were perceived, complete with sensory and emotional context. I understand the technology, Forlag replied. He had been briefed thoroughly. Of course, Commander. We will begin with a calibration sequence, then proceed chronologically through the conflict. You need only relax and allow the memories to surface naturally. Forlag lay back as the sensors descended. A tingling sensation spread across his neural centers as the calibration began. He closed all four eyes and surrendered to the inevitable. The first memories were benign enough: strategic meetings, fleet deployments, the careful calculations that preceded any Kthar military action. Forlag watched his younger self moving through the command deck of his flagship, the Crystal Dominance, issuing orders with confident precision. He felt again the absolute certainty that had guided him then, the unquestioned belief in Kthar superiority. Excellent neural coherence, he heard Dr. Severax murmur from somewhere distant. The commander's recall is exceptional. The memories flowed smoothly. The initial detection of human ships in the disputed system, the diplomatic warnings issued and ignored, the methodical preparation for conflict. Forlag's younger self studied the intelligence reports on human ship capabilities with dismissive confidence. Primitive shielding, inefficient weapon systems, rudimentary tactical doctrine. Deploy in standard confrontation formation. Memory Forlag ordered his fleet. They will either retreat or be eliminated. Either outcome is acceptable. Present Forlag felt his respiration rate increasing as the memories approached the first engagement. A slight tremor began in his limbs. Commander, your stress indicators are elevating. Kalen's voice seemed to come from a great distance. Would you prefer to pause the session? No, Forlag replied. Continue. The memories plunged forward into the first battle. The Kthar fleet moved with perfect coordination, their formations mathematically optimized for maximum tactical advantage. The human ships, a mixed collection of military vessels and armed civilian craft, arranged themselves in a defensive screen around their colony ships. Memory Forlag watched with detached interest as his fleet executed the standard opening maneuvers, targeting the largest human military vessels with focused fire. The humans responded predictably, attempting to disperse and return fire. Their energy weapons dissipated harmlessly against Kthar shields. Their projectile weapons, though primitive, occasionally managed to penetrate, causing minor damage. As expected, Memory Forlag commented to his second-in-command. They cannot match our coordination or firepower. This will be concluded efficiently. But as the battle progressed, small anomalies began to appear in the human response. A damaged vessel, rather than retreating as Kthar doctrine would dictate, accelerated directly toward a Kthar cruiser, firing all weapons despite their diminishing effectiveness as systems failed. Another human ship positioned itself to absorb fire directed at a colony vessel, sacrificing itself without apparent tactical gain. Behavioral outliers, Memory Forlag dismissed. Desperation or malfunction. On the archiving platform, Forlag's tremors intensified. Commander, your physiological responses are exceeding anticipated parameters, Dr. Severax's voice broke through. Are you experiencing distress? I am. Experiencing memory, Forlag replied, his voice strained. Continue. We approached the critical phase. The memories shifted to the Xylos Nebula, a vast cloud of ionized gas and stellar debris that bordered the disputed system. Memory Forlag had pursued the retreating human forces into the nebula, confident in his superior sensors and the disciplined precision of his fleet. They seek to hide, but there is no concealment from us, he told his commanders. Maintain pursuit formation. Eliminate all resistance. The nebula glowed around the Cthar ships, streams of colored gas illuminated by distant stars. Forlag's sensors cut through the interference, identifying human ships attempting to conceal themselves among the denser gas clouds. Target and eliminate, sequential priority, Memory Forlag ordered calmly. The Cthar fleet moved forward methodically, destroying one human vessel after another. Victory was proceeding exactly as calculated, until it wasn't. A group of smaller human ships, previously undetected, suddenly emerged from a particularly dense region of the nebula. Instead of fleeing or engaging from distance, they accelerated directly toward the Cthar formation. Anomalous behavior, Memory Forlag noted with the first hint of concern. Tactical purpose unclear. The human ships began firing in patterns that made no sense by Cthar standards, targeting non-critical systems, creating asymmetrical damage across multiple vessels rather than focusing to destroy single targets. Their movements became erratic, unpredictable, following no discernible formation. Adjust targeting algorithms, Memory Forlag ordered, a note of tension entering his voice. Compensate for erratic movement patterns. But the human ships had closed distance rapidly. Several smaller craft deliberately collided with Cthar vessels, their reactor cores detonating on impact. Others targeted previously damaged sections with remarkable precision, as if they had somehow identified weaknesses in the Cthar defensive systems. On the archiving platform, Forlag's entire body convulsed. The monitoring equipment registered alarming spikes in neural activity. Commander, we must pause, Kalen began. No, Forlag's voice was commanding even in distress. You must see, all must see. The memory continued, growing more intense. The elegant Cthar formation had fractured, individual ships now fighting for survival rather than executing the careful tactical plan. Memory Forlag's flagship, the Crystal Dominance, shuddered under repeated impacts as 3 human vessels, already heavily damaged, rammed its port side in succession. Boarding detected, a subordinate reported, panic evident even through Cthar restraint. Multiple hull breaches. Human forces entering through sectors 7, 12, and 15. Impossible, Memory Forlag responded. Their vessels are too damaged to have survived such impacts. They appear to have deliberately crashed their vessels into our hull, Commander. The survivors are forcing entry. The memory shifted to the interior corridors of the Crystal Dominance. Cthar security forces in their immaculate battle armor moved into defensive positions, energy weapons at ready. They were the elite of the Imperial forces, trained in perfect discipline and tactical doctrine. The humans that came around the corridor junction were anything but perfect. Their environment suits were damaged, exposing glimpses of soft flesh beneath. Some were visibly bleeding. Their weapons were a hodgepodge of military and improvised tools. They should have been no match for the Cthar defenders, but they moved with a frenzy that defied tactical prediction. Some charged directly into Cthar fire, absorbing fatal energy blasts, but continuing forward through sheer momentum. Others fired wildly, creating chaos rather than precision. Their voices, translated imperfectly through Cthar systems, were a cacophony of shouting, screaming, even laughter. Memory Forlag, now directing defense from the command deck, watched in growing horror as the security feeds showed corridor after corridor falling to the human onslaught. It wasn't superior tactics or technology. It was sheer, unrelenting savagery combined with a disregard for personal survival that no Cthar training had prepared them for. They're targeting the central power distribution node, a tactical officer reported in disbelief. How could they know our ship layout? They don't, Memory Forelag realized aloud. They're attacking everything, destroying indiscriminately. Statistically, they will eventually hit critical systems. In the archiving chamber, Kalen and the technical team watched in stunned silence as the true history of the Battle of Xylo's Nebula unfolded before them. The monitoring equipment registered Forelag's extreme physiological distress, but no one moved to terminate the session. They were transfixed by the horror they witnessed. The memory reached its most intense point. Memory Forelag stood on his command deck as alarms blared and systems failed around him. A final security feed showed a group of humans fighting their way toward the command deck. At their lead was a human female, her face partially visible through a cracked helmet visor. Despite her injuries, a visible bone protruding from one arm, burn damage across her torso, she moved forward with terrifying determination. She looked directly at the security sensor, somehow knowing she was being watched. Her expression burned itself into Forelag's memory. Not hate, not fear, but a terrible resolve beyond rational comprehension. She spoke, and the translation came through with chilling clarity. You should have left our families alone. The feed cut to static. Moments later, the deck shuddered as explosions rocked the ship. Evacuate command personnel. Memory Forelag ordered. All data cores to be destroyed rather than captured. The memory fragmented as the crystal dominance began to break apart. Escape pods launching. Emergency distress signals. The nebula glowing red and orange as ships exploded on both sides. In the final moments preserved in memory, Forelag's escape pod rotated slowly, giving him a panoramic view of the battle's aftermath. The once proud Cthar fleet was scattered, many ships destroyed or crippled. But the human forces had been virtually annihilated. They had lost. By any objective measure, they had lost. Yet they had inflicted damage beyond any tactical model's prediction. As debris and bodies, both Cthar and human, drifted past his viewport, Memory Forelag confronted a realization that would haunt him for decades. The humans hadn't expected to win. They had expected to die. And they had embraced that fate with a fervor that transformed them from rational combatants into something else entirely. Something terrifying. The memory faded, and Forelag lay trembling on the archiving platform. The chamber was silent except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Slowly, the technical team began disconnecting sensors, their movements mechanical, their four eyes avoiding contact with each other or with Forelag. Kalen approached the platform hesitantly. "Commander," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "The official accounts were fabricated," Forelag completed, his voice weary beyond measure. The Empire could not acknowledge what truly happened. It contradicted everything we believed about ourselves, about warfare, about humans. But the casualties, the lost ships, attributed to nebula conditions, to technical failures, to anything but the truth. Forelag slowly sat up, his aged frame seeming even more fragile now. "We won, young one. Never doubt that. We destroyed their colony, eliminated their military presence in that sector. But the cost. The cost was beyond calculation." Dr. Sevrax approached, data tablet in hand. "Commander, the archival process was successful. Your memories have been preserved with 97% fidelity." He hesitated. However, given the discrepancies with official records, the Directorate may require additional review before they decide whether truth or comfortable fiction better serves the Empire. Forelag finished with unexpected sharpness. "Do what you must, Doctor. I have fulfilled my obligation." Kalen helped the commander from the platform. "Should I arrange transport to your dwelling, sir?" Forelag looked at the young historian, studying his expression. "What troubles you, Analyst Kalen? Speak freely." Kalen's upper eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of Cthar distress. "If what I witnessed is accurate, if humans are capable of such actions, then much of our strategic doctrine regarding their species is based on incomplete data." "Not incomplete," Forlag corrected. Deliberately ignored. We could not accept that a species might function outside our understanding of rational behavior. He placed a manipulator on Kalen's shoulder. What will you do with this knowledge, I wonder? Kalen stood straighter. My duty is to historical accuracy, Commander. Forlag nodded slowly. As it should be. The next morning cycle, Planetary Information Network alerts flashed across Cthar communication channels throughout the Empire. A classified military archive had been leaked to public information repositories. The authentic memory recording of Battle Commander Forlag during the human conflict at Xylos Nebula was being viewed by millions of citizens. The initial reaction was predictable. Outrage, accusations of falsification, demands for investigation. Military commentators dismissed the recording as corrupted data or the confused memories of an aging commander. Political analysts labeled it a human psychological operation designed to sow discord. But as expert systems analyzed the neural patterns embedded in the recording, the truth became undeniable. The memory coherence, the emotional signatures, the sensory detail, all matched known parameters for authentic experience. This was not fabrication. This was history as it had actually occurred. Within 3-day cycles, the military directorate issued a terse statement acknowledging some factual discrepancies in historical accounts of the border skirmish, attributing them to wartime security protocols. A full review of tactical doctrine regarding human engagement was announced. In academic institutions across the empire, specialists in xenopsychology and military strategy began frantically revising their understanding of human behavior. The concept of rational sacrifice, previously considered a theoretical construct, was now recognized as a fundamental aspect of human combat psychology. The willingness to ensure mutual destruction rather than accept defeat, to prioritize inflicting damage over personal survival, to channel emotions like grief and rage into combat effectiveness. These traits were cataloged and analyzed with growing concern. Forlag watched the public discourse from his dwelling, neither participating nor hiding. When a military directorate formally requested his expertise for the doctrinal review, he declined politely but firmly. His time as a warrior had ended. The truth was his final service to the Empire. Kalen visited him on the 7th day after the disclosure. The young historian entered Forlag's dwelling with a formal bow, but his posture carried a new confidence. The Directorate has identified you as the source of the leak, Kalen stated without preamble. Forlag's upper eyes widened slightly in surprise. An interesting conclusion, given that I lack both the technical expertise and the access to accomplish such an act. Indeed, I informed them of this discrepancy. Kalen's manipulators shifted nervously. They have decided to focus their investigation on technical staff associated with the archive. And yet you are here, not in custodial detention. Historical analysts are considered too specialized for routine security screening. A hint of what might have been humor-colored Kalen's voice. An oversight that may be corrected in future. Forlag studied the young Cthar. Why, Analyst Kalen, truth has its place, but you have potentially compromised Imperial security. Have I? Kalen countered. Or have I prevented a far greater compromise? He moved to the window, gazing out at the Capitol spires. If we had continued to underestimate humans, to dismiss them as emotional, irrational, inferior, would we not be vulnerable to another Xylos? Perhaps. Forlag joined him at the window. But fear is a dangerous foundation for policy. It is not fear I hope to inspire, Commander. It is understanding. Kalen turned to face the older Cthar. Humans are not what we thought them to be. They cannot be predicted or controlled through our traditional methods. This does not make them our enemies by default, but it does require a fundamental reassessment of our approach. For the first time in many cycles, Forlag felt the tremors in his limbs subside. You show wisdom beyond your years, Analyst Kalen. I had an excellent teacher. Kalen bowed deeply. Your memory will serve the Empire better than any victory could have. 2 standard cycles later, the Cthar Diplomatic Directorate announced the first comprehensive treaty negotiations with the human United Systems. The official communique cited evolving understanding of mutual interests as the motivation. Unofficially, Cthar diplomatic personnel received new guidelines for human interaction, protocols that acknowledged human emotional responses as legitimate factors rather than weaknesses to be exploited. The term Xylos Protocol entered Cthar strategic vocabulary, defining a situation where conventional superior force might be countered by seemingly irrational but devastatingly effective sacrifice tactics. Military simulations began incorporating scenarios where enemy forces did not behave according to optimal self-preservation models. The comfortable certainty of Cthar tactical doctrine gained a shadow of doubt, a healthy, necessary doubt. Forlag declined all public appearances and commentary on these developments. His only statement, issued through official channels, was characteristically direct. Truth serves the empire better than comforting falsehoods. We adapt or we perish. As diplomatic envoys prepared for their mission to human space, they were required to study the Xylos recording and complete a psychological adaptation course. They learned to recognize human emotional cues, to understand the complex interplay between rational self-interest and emotional motivation that drove human decision-making. Most importantly, they learn a new axiom of interspecies relations. Never assume that a species' different values mean they value their objectives less intensely than we value ours. In human space, intelligence services noted the sudden shift in Cthar diplomatic approach with both surprise and suspicion. Analysts detected unusual reference patterns in Cthar communications, repeated mentions of Xylos context, and sacrifice variable. When finally briefed on the leaked Cthar memory recording, the human diplomatic service was divided in its response. Some advisors worried that being perceived as dangerously unpredictable might deteriorate relations further. Others saw strategic advantage in the new Cthar caution. Admiral Helena Reyes, one of the few surviving senior officers from the border skirmish, reviewed the translation of Forlag's memory with particular interest. The recording ended with her face, 57 years younger, contorted with pain and determination, staring into a Cthar security sensor. "You should have left our families alone," she whispered along with her younger self, the words as raw now as they had been. Then, after viewing the complete recording, she sat in silence for several minutes before addressing the awaiting diplomatic team. "They see us now," she said finally, "not as inferiors, not as curiosities, but as equals in the only currency that truly matters in this galaxy, the capacity for both creation and destruction." She closed the data file with a decisive gesture. This is not an opportunity for revenge or gloating. This is an opportunity for genuine understanding. The first formal diplomatic exchange under the new treaty took place on a neutral station in unclaimed space. The Cthar delegation, led by senior diplomat Nurix, demonstrated unprecedented adaptability to human customs. The human representatives, briefed on Cthar communication patterns, made efforts to present information in the structured, logical format preferred by Cthar cognition. As the formalities concluded, Nurix approached Admiral Reyes, who had been invited as a historic figure now serving in advisory capacity. "Admiral," the Cthar diplomat began, "I am instructed to convey personal acknowledgement from Battle Commander Forlag. He wishes you to know that your actions at Xylos Nebula, while counter to all Cthar understanding of warfare, demonstrated qualities worthy of study and respect." Reyes nodded slowly. "Please inform Commander Forlag that the lessons of Xylos were paid for dearly on both sides. Some prices are too high, even for victory." "Indeed," Nurix agreed. "This is a concept we are learning to appreciate." As the delegations dispersed, human and Cthar representatives found themselves walking side by side through the station corridors. There was no warmth between them, no easy camaraderie or friendship. But there was something new, a measured wariness that acknowledged the capacity for both rational cooperation and devastating conflict. It was not peace born of trust, but peace born of mutual recognition. Here was a species that could not be easily defeated, could not be easily understood, could not be easily controlled. In his dwelling on the Kthar homeworld, Forlag watched the diplomatic proceedings via secure transmission. For the first time in 57 years, he felt the burden of memory lightening. The tremors that had plagued him receded. The truth, however terrible, had finally been acknowledged. The humans that haunted his dreams, their faces contorted with determination beyond reason, their bodies continuing to fight beyond biological limits, their voices carrying emotions no Kthar translation could fully capture, would always remain with him. But now they haunted his people as well, a specter of what might happen when a species was pushed too far. It was not the legacy he had envisioned as a decorated battle commander. It was something far more valuable, a warning that would preserve lives on both sides of the galactic divide. As the diplomatic transmission concluded, Forlag moved to his personal archive and carefully removed the Star of Xylo's medal from its display. He studied it one last time, the emblem of a victory that never truly was, before securing it in a modest container. With precise writing, he addressed it to the human diplomatic mission with a simple note. To Admiral Helena Reyes, you earned this more than I. Understanding, not fear, would be his final legacy. And in the unforgiving calculus of interstellar politics, understanding was the only foundation upon which lasting peace could be built.